It was a sunny afternoon, the kind where everything feels calm and perfect. The sky was a bright shade of blue, dotted with fluffy white clouds that looked like cotton candy. At the local park, children laughed as they ran around playing tag, swinging on swings or sliding down slides. Parents sat on benches nearby, chatting quietly while keeping an eye on their kids. It was just another ordinary day, or so it seemed. Among the crowd in the park was Emily, an 8-year-old girl with curly brown hair and big, curious eyes. She had cerebral palsy, which made it hard for her to walk without assistance, but Emily didn't let that stop her from enjoying life. Every weekend, she came to the park with her mom because it was one of her favorite places. Today, she sat on a bench near the playground, holding on to her favorite stuffed bunny named Mr. Whiskers. From her spot, she could see the other kids having fun, and though she couldn't join them easily, she loved watching them play. Emily's mom, Sarah, sat beside her, smiling softly as she watched her daughter take in the world around her. "Do you want to try walking over to the swings today?" Sarah asked gently. Emily hesitated for a moment, before nodding. She always tried her best, even when things were difficult. Slowly, she stood up from the bench using her cane, gripping it tightly as she took tiny steps forward. Her movements weren't smooth, but she was determined. Just then, a man approached the area. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a stern expression. His dark sunglasses hid his eyes, and he walked briskly, tugging at the leash of a large German shepherd by his side. The dog sniffed the ground curiously, its tail wagging lazily. At first glance, the man seemed harmless enough, just another visitor to the park. But something about him felt off. The man stopped walking when he noticed Emily struggling to move. Instead of offering help or giving her space, he stared at her for a long moment. Then, without warning, he spoke. "Why do people like you even bother leaving the house?" His voice was loud and sharp, cutting through the peaceful hum of the park like a knife slicing through butter. Everyone within earshot froze. Some parents turned their heads to look, unsure if they'd heard correctly. Children paused mid-laugh, sensing the sudden tension in the air. Even the birds chirping in the trees seemed to quiet down. Emily froze too, her grip tightening on both her cane and Mr. Whiskers. Tears welled up in her eyes as she processed what the man had said. She didn't understand why he was being so mean. What had she done wrong? Sarah immediately stepped forward, putting herself between the man and her daughter. "Excuse me?" she said firmly, her voice rising slightly. "What did you just say?" The man didn't back down. If anything, his scowl deepened. "You heard me," he snapped. "She can barely walk. Why waste everyone's time bringing her here? She's not normal." His words hung in the air like poison, making everyone uncomfortable. Sarah clenched her fists, trying to stay calm for Emily's sake. "My daughter is amazing," she replied, her voice shaking with anger, "and she deserves to be here just as much as anyone else." But the man wasn't listening. He shook his head dismissively and muttered under his breath, "People like her are just a burden to society. They shouldn't expect special treatment." By now, several people had gathered around, drawn by the commotion. Some whispered to each other, clearly upset by what they were hearing. Others kept their distance, unsure of what to do. One woman holding her toddler's hand looked visibly shaken. "How could someone say such cruel things?" she murmured, to no one in particular. Emily, still standing awkwardly with her cane, felt smaller than ever. She wanted to cry but tried to hold it in. She didn't want to give the man the satisfaction of seeing how much his words hurt her. But inside she felt crushed. That's when something unexpected happened. A young man sitting on a nearby bench stood up and walked over. He was in his late 20s with short brown hair and a kind face. He wore jeans and a plain t-shirt, and he carried a book in one hand. Up until now, he'd been quietly observing the scene unfold. When he reached Emily and her mom, he knelt down so he was at Emily's level. Smiling warmly, he held out a tissue. "Hey there, champ," he said softly. "Don't let that guy get to you. You're incredible just the way you are." Emily sniffled but managed a small smile. She wiped her tears with the tissue, feeling a little better. Sarah turned to the stranger, relief washing over her face. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "We don't usually encounter people like him, but when we do—" Her voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The young man nodded understandingly. "I'm Alex," he introduced himself. "I couldn't just sit there and watch. No one should have to deal with that kind of cruelty." As Alex comforted Emily, he revealed something surprising. When Sarah mentioned how often they faced discrimination because of Emily's disability, Alex admitted that he knew exactly how it felt. "I used to be bullied growing up," he explained. "It doesn't make sense, does it? People judge others based on things they don't understand." He gestured toward the bag resting on the bench behind him. Inside was a neatly folded military uniform jacket. "I'm actually a soldier," Alex continued. "I'm on leave right now, so I thought I'd relax here for a bit. Sometimes it's nice to blend in instead of wearing the uniform all the time." His words brought a flicker of hope to Sarah and Emily. Here was someone who understood their pain and was willing to stand up for them. But little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of the story. Across the park, seated on a bench far enough to avoid notice, was someone else who had seen everything, and he wasn't about to let the man's hateful behavior go unpunished. Unbeknownst to the crowd, Emily's father, Captain Mark Thompson, was watching silently from afar. A decorated military officer, Mark had taken the day off work to spend time with his family. Though he'd intended to give Sarah and Emily some space, he couldn't ignore what he'd just witnessed. Seeing the fear in his daughter's eyes stirred something deep inside him. Mark stood up slowly, his towering frame commanding attention. Without saying a word, he began walking toward the group gathered around Emily. His presence alone changed the atmosphere of the park. Everyone turned to look at him, sensing that something big was about to happen. For Emily, seeing her dad approach filled her with a mix of emotions. Relief washed over her, but there was also a glimmer of excitement. She knew her dad wouldn't tolerate anyone treating her badly. And as Mark drew closer, it became clear that he wasn't going to let the man's cruel words slide, not today, and not ever again. As Mark approached the group, the tension in the air grew thicker. His tall, imposing figure commanded attention without him having to say a word. People who had been whispering among themselves fell silent, their eyes following his every move. Even Alex, the kind stranger comforting Emily, stepped back slightly to give Mark space. It wasn't just his size that made people take notice. It was the way he carried himself. Every step he took radiated authority and purpose, as if he were walking onto a battlefield rather than a park. When Mark finally reached Emily, he knelt down beside her, his knees brushing against the grass. For a moment, all he did was look at her. His gaze was intense but filled with love, and it softened instantly when he saw the tears still glistening in her eyes. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said gently, pulling her into a tight hug. "Are you okay?" Emily nodded, clutching her stuffed bunny tightly. She buried her face in her father's chest, feeling safe for the first time since the man's cruel words had shattered her peace. Mark kissed the top of her head before turning his attention to Sarah. "What happened?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with concern. Sarah quickly explained what had transpired: the man's harsh comments, Emily's reaction, and how Alex had stepped in to comfort them. As she spoke, Mark's expression hardened. His jaw tightened and his hands balled into fists. Though he tried to keep his emotions in check, it was clear that anger was simmering beneath the surface. Mark turned to face the crowd gathered around them. His piercing eyes scanned the area until they landed on the man responsible for the chaos. The man, who had been standing off to the side pretending to busy himself with his dog, froze under Mark's stare. He hadn't noticed Mark earlier, but now there was no escaping his presence. Without hesitation, Mark stood up and walked toward the man. Each step he took seemed louder than the last, drawing everyone's attention. Parents pulled their children closer, unsure of what was about to happen. Some began filming the scene on their phones, sensing that this confrontation would be unforgettable. When Mark stopped in front of the man, he didn't say anything at first. Instead, he simply stared, allowing the weight of his presence to sink in. The man shifted uncomfortably, his confidence wavering. Finally, Mark broke the silence. "I think we need to have a talk," he said, his tone calm but firm. There was no yelling, no shouting, just a quiet certainty that sent chills down the man's spine. The man stammered, clearly caught off guard. I didn't mean anything by it," he blurted out, his voice trembling. "I was just—" "Save it," Mark interrupted, cutting him off with a single raised hand. His voice remained steady, but there was an unmistakable edge to it now. "You don't get to make excuses for what you said. Not here. Not today." The man's face turned red, partly from embarrassment and partly from frustration. He glanced around nervously, realizing that everyone in the park was watching. Some people looked angry, others disgusted, and a few even sympathetic. But none of them supported him. Mark continued speaking, his voice carrying across the park so everyone could hear. "You claim to care about society," he said, addressing the man directly. "But let me tell you something about true strength. True strength isn't about tearing others down. It's about lifting them up. My daughter may have challenges, but she is braver and stronger than most adults I know, including you." His words struck a chord with the onlookers. Several parents nodded in agreement while others whispered to each other, sharing their thoughts. A young woman holding her toddler wiped away a tear, moved by Mark's speech. The man tried to argue back, but Mark's commanding demeanor left no room for debate. "People like my daughter are not a burden," Mark continued. "They're fighters. They inspire us to be better versions of ourselves. And if you can't see that, then maybe the problem isn't with them. It's with you." The man opened his mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. Instead, he muttered something, unintelligible, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Mark didn't stop there. "Now," he said, his tone softening slightly but still firm, "you will apologize. Not just to my daughter but to everyone here who heard your hateful words. Because what you said wasn't just directed at Emily, it was directed at anyone who has ever faced discrimination because of who they are or what they can't do." The man hesitated, clearly reluctant. But Mark's unwavering gaze told him there was no way out. Slowly, reluctantly, he turned to face Emily. I'm sorry," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Mark crossed his arms over his chest. "Louder," he demanded. "I'm sorry," the man repeated, this time louder but still lacking sincerity. Mark nodded, accepting the apology on behalf of Emily. "Good," he said. "But remember this. Actions speak louder than words. If I ever see you treating someone like this again, you'll answer to me. Do you understand?" The man nodded quickly, eager to escape the situation. Without another word, he grabbed his dog's leash and hurried away, disappearing into the distance. As soon as he was gone, the crowd erupted into applause. Strangers patted Mark on the back, thanking him for standing up not only for Emily, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. One elderly woman approached him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "My granddaughter has Down syndrome, and hearing you speak gives me hope that people like her will always have someone willing to fight for them." Mark smiled warmly, touched by her words. "We all deserve respect," he replied, "no matter who we are or what challenges we face." Meanwhile, Emily watched everything unfold with wide eyes. She had never seen her dad act like this before. Sure, she knew he was strong, he was a soldier after all, but seeing him stand up to someone so confidently made her feel proud. When the commotion died down, Mark returned to Emily and Sarah. Kneeling beside his daughter once more, he cupped her face in his hands. "Listen to me, Em," he said softly. "People like that man are cowards. They lash out because they're afraid of what they don't understand. But you're fearless. Don't ever forget that." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly seen. Not as someone with a disability, but as a person worthy of love and respect. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the family decided it was time to leave. But the impact of what had happened lingered in the air. Parents continued discussing the incident as they packed up their things and children ran around playing, seemingly unfazed by the drama that had unfolded. For Emily, however, the day was far from ordinary. It started with cruelty, but ended with courage, and a newfound appreciation for the people in her life who loved her unconditionally. On the drive home, Emily sat quietly in the back seat, clutching Mr. Whiskers close to her chest. She thought about everything that had happened. The mean man's words, Alex's kindness, and her dad's bravery. Despite the unpleasant encounter, she couldn't help but feel grateful. Sarah glanced at Mark, who was driving. "You really handled that well," she said, her voice filled with admiration. Mark shrugged modestly. "It's not about handling it well," he replied. "It's about doing what's right. Emily deserves to live in a world where she feels safe and valued. If I can play a small part in making that happen, then I'll do whatever it takes." Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand affectionately. "You're an amazing father," she said. In the back seat, Emily chimed in. "And you're my hero, Daddy," she added, her voice full of pride. Mark chuckled, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. "And you're mine, sweetheart," he said. "Always." As they drove home, the events of the day replayed in their minds. What started as a quiet afternoon at the park had turned into something extraordinary, a reminder that even in moments of darkness, there are always heroes ready to shine a light. Little did they know the story was far from over. News of the incident would soon spread beyond the park, sparking conversations and inspiring change. But for now, the family focused on healing and cherishing the bond they shared. After all, sometimes the simplest acts of love and bravery can leave the biggest impact. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. Emily sat in the back seat staring out the window as the world blurred past her. Her mind replayed the events of the day, the man's cruel words, her dad's powerful confrontation, and the crowd's applause. She felt a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her: anger, sadness, pride, and even relief. It was overwhelming for an 8-year-old, but she tried to focus on the positive parts. Her dad had stood up for her, and strangers had cheered him on. That meant something. Sarah glanced at her daughter through the rearview mirror, noticing how silent she was. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked softly, her voice breaking the stillness in the car. Emily nodded but didn't say anything. Instead, she hugged Mr. Whiskers closer to her chest, drawing comfort from the familiar softness of her stuffed bunny. Mark noticed, too. He reached his hand back and gave her knee a gentle squeeze. "We're proud of you, Em," he said reassuringly. "What happened today wasn't your fault. You didn't deserve any of that." Emily looked at her dad, her big eyes searching his face. "Daddy, why did he say those things? Why does he hate me?" Mark sighed deeply, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. He hated seeing his daughter hurt like this. "He doesn't hate you, sweetheart," he explained gently. "He's just scared. People like him don't understand differences, so instead of trying to learn, they lash out. But that doesn't mean what he said was right. Hate comes from ignorance, and ignorance can be fought with kindness and bravery." Emily thought about this for a moment. "So, I should feel sorry for him?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. Mark chuckled softly. "Not necessarily," he replied, "but understanding where someone's coming from doesn't mean excusing their behavior. What matters is how you choose to respond. And today, you responded with strength. You didn't let his words break you." Emily smiled faintly, feeling a tiny flicker of pride ignite within her. Maybe her dad was right. Maybe she was stronger than she realized. When they got home, Sarah helped Emily settle onto the couch while Mark made dinner. The house was warm and cozy, a stark contrast to the tension they'd experienced earlier at the park. As Emily flipped through the channels on the TV, Sarah joined Mark in the kitchen. "Do you think she's really okay?" Sarah whispered. Glancing toward the living room, Mark shrugged, stirring the pasta sauce thoughtfully. "She will be," he said. "It's going to take some time for her to process everything, but she's tough. She'll get through it." Sarah nodded, though. Worry still lingered in her eyes. I just wish we could protect her from things like this, she admitted. No child should have to deal with hate like that. I know, Mark agreed. But the truth is, we can't shield her from every bad thing in the world. All we can do is teach her how to handle them and show her that she's never alone. Meanwhile, news of the incident at the park was spreading faster than anyone expected. Several bystanders had filmed the confrontation between Mark and the man, capturing both the cruelty of the man's words and the power of Mark's response. By evening, clips of the encounter were being shared on social media platforms, sparking outrage and admiration alike. One video, posted by a young mother named Lisa, quickly went viral. In the caption, she wrote, "This is what real heroism looks like. A father standing up for his disabled daughter after a racist man attacked her in public. Let's amplify this story because everyone deserves respect." Comments poured in almost instantly. Some praised Mark for his courage and leadership, calling him a role model for parents everywhere. Others shared their own experiences of discrimination, tagging friends and family members who might relate. The hashtag #TashemStandWithEmily began trending, uniting people across the globe in solidarity. Back at home, Mark had no idea that his actions were gaining attention online. He was focused on making dinner and ensuring Emily felt safe. After setting the table, he called everyone to eat. Dinner was unusually quiet, with Emily picking at her food more than eating it. "Hey, champ," Mark said, leaning forward slightly. "How about this? Tomorrow we'll go somewhere fun, just the three of us, somewhere you've always wanted to visit. How does that sound?" Emily's face lit up immediately. "Really?" she asked, her voice tinged with excitement. "Absolutely," Mark replied with a grin. "You've earned it." Later that night, after Emily had gone to bed, Mark and Sarah sat together in the living room scrolling through their phones. It was then that Sarah stumbled upon one of the videos from the park. Her eyes widened as she watched the clip, recognizing the scene instantly. "Mark, look at this," she said, handing him her phone. Mark frowned as he watched himself confronting the man. He hadn't realized anyone had recorded the moment. "Wow," he muttered, running a hand over his face. "I guess word travels fast these days." Sarah scrolled through the comments, reading some aloud. "This man is a true hero. We need more people like him in the world. Sending love to the little girl and her family." Mark shook his head, feeling humbled. "I wasn't trying to be a hero," he said. "I just wanted to protect my daughter." "Well, you did," Sarah replied, squeezing his hand. "And now thousands of people are inspired by what you did. You're showing the world that standing up against hate isn't just important, it's necessary." While the Thompson family slept peacefully that night, the man who had caused the chaos found no rest. His name was Richard, and he couldn't stop replaying the events of the day in his mind. The way Mark had stared him down, the crowd's disapproving gazes and the humiliating apology he'd been forced to give, all of it weighed heavily on him. Richard paced around his apartment, muttering angrily to himself. "Who does he think he is?" he growled, referring to Mark. "Just because he's some big-shot soldier doesn't mean he gets to lecture me." But deep down, Richard knew he was wrong. He couldn't deny the guilt gnawing at him or the shame of being called out publicly. Worse still, he feared the backlash. Sure enough, when he checked his phone later that evening, he discovered dozens of messages flooding his inbox. Strangers had tracked him down on social media, leaving scathing comments and threats. "You disgust me," one message read. "Hope karma finds you soon," another said. Richard deleted the app in frustration, but the damage was done. For the first time in his life, he felt truly cornered. The next morning, Emily woke up feeling lighter than she had the previous day. Her parents' reassurance and the promise of a fun outing helped ease her worries. Over breakfast, she chattered excitedly about where they might go. "How about the zoo?" she suggested, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "The zoo it is," Mark agreed, smiling warmly. As they prepared to leave, Sarah pulled Mark aside. "Have you seen the videos?" she asked quietly. Mark nodded. "Yeah, I saw them last night. Crazy, huh?" "It's amazing, actually," Sarah corrected. People are rallying behind us, they're sharing stories, offering support. It's incredible, Mark sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I just hope it doesn't blow up too much. I don't want Emily to feel like she's in the spotlight. Sarah placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. She won't, she promised. We'll make sure of that. But maybe, just maybe, this could be a chance to spread awareness, to remind people that kindness matters. Mark considered this for a moment before nodding. All right, he said finally. If it helps others, then I'm okay with it. At the zoo, Emily's laughter filled the air as she marveled at the animals. She fed giraffes, watched penguins waddle around, and giggled uncontrollably at the antics of mischievous monkeys. For a few hours, the weight of the previous day lifted, replaced by pure joy. Mark and Sarah watched her with smiles on their faces, grateful for moments like these. Though the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, they knew they had each other, and that was enough. Little did they know, the ripple effect of Mark's actions was only beginning. Across the country, people were talking about the incident, sharing lessons learned and vowing to stand up against hate whenever they encountered it. For Emily, however, the most important lesson came from her dad. Love conquers fear. Kindness defeats cruelty. And no matter what challenges life throws your way, you're never alone. The days following the incident at the park were anything but ordinary for Emily and her family. The viral videos of Mark confronting the man had ignited a firestorm of reactions online, turning their quiet lives into something resembling a national conversation. News outlets picked up the story, sharing clips alongside headlines like, "Hero Dad stands up to hate," and "A disabled girl inspires millions after father's powerful response." For Emily, life became a mix of confusion and wonder. She didn't fully understand why so many people were talking about her, or why strangers kept stopping her parents in public to thank them. But she could feel the shift. At school, her classmates treated her differently too. Kids who had once ignored her now wanted to sit with her at lunch or play with her during recess. Teachers praised her courage, though Emily wasn't sure what exactly she'd done to deserve it. Mark and Sarah did their best to shield Emily from the overwhelming attention. They turned off notifications on their phones, declined interviews with reporters, and avoided discussing the incident unless absolutely necessary. Still, they couldn't escape the ripple effects entirely. Packages began arriving at their doorstep, gifts, letters, and cards, filled with messages of encouragement from strangers around the world. One package even contained a handmade quilt, stitched with the words, "You are loved." "It's nice that people care," Sarah said one evening as she sorted through the mail. "But I just hope this doesn't overwhelm Em." Mark nodded, leaning back on the couch. "We'll protect her," he promised. "No matter what happens, we'll keep things normal for her." Meanwhile, Richard, the man who had sparked the entire ordeal, was struggling to cope with the fallout. His social media accounts were flooded with hate messages, some threatening his safety. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with someone labeled a bigot. Even his boss called him into the office after seeing the videos, warning him that his behavior reflected poorly on the company. Richard tried to defend himself, claiming he hadn't meant any harm. It was just an opinion, he argued, but deep down he knew his words had crossed a line. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, making it hard to sleep or focus. He felt trapped, cornered by both the public and his own guilt. One night, unable to bear the isolation any longer, Richard decided to take drastic action. He sat down at his kitchen table and drafted a letter, an apology addressed not just to Emily and her family, but to everyone who had been hurt by his words. It was clumsy and awkwardly worded, but it came from a place of genuine regret. "I never intended to cause pain," he wrote. "I let my anger and ignorance get the better of me, and for that I am truly sorry. I've spent these past few days reflecting on my actions, and I realize now how wrong I was. To Emily and her family, please accept my sincerest apologies. I will spend the rest of my life working to be a better person." He mailed the letter to Mark and Sarah's address, unsure if they would even read it. Then, exhausted and emotionally drained, he collapsed onto his bed, hoping for some semblance of peace. When the letter arrived at the Thompson household, Sarah opened it cautiously. She hesitated before showing it to Mark, unsure of how he would react. "Do you think we should tell Emily?" she asked quietly. Mark skimmed the letter, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed and set it down on the counter. "Let's wait," he said. "She doesn't need to know about this, right now. As far as she's concerned, it's over." Sarah nodded in agreement. "What do you think of it?" Mark shrugged. "It's something," he admitted. "At least he's trying to make amends. Whether it's sincere or not, only time will tell." While Richard wrestled with his conscience, the broader impact of Mark's actions continued to grow. Schools across the country started using the incident as a teaching moment, incorporating discussions about empathy, disability awareness, and standing up against discrimination into their curriculums. Parents shared the story with their children, emphasizing the importance of treating others with kindness. In one small town, a group of teenagers organized a kindness march, inspired by Emily's resilience and Mark's bravery. Hundreds of people showed up carrying signs that read, "Love win where and be the change." Speeches were given, tears were shed, and pledges were made to create a more inclusive community. Even celebrities joined the movement, posting supportive messages online. One famous actor tweeted, "To Emily and her dad, thank you for reminding us all what true strength looks like. Let's carry this lesson forward." The wave of positivity reached Emily indirectly, filtering through her parents' efforts to keep her grounded. Though she didn't grasp the full extent of the movement, she noticed subtle changes in the way people treated her. Strangers smiled warmly when they passed her in the grocery store. Classmates invited her to birthday parties, and one day a classmate named Mia approached her during recess with a shy smile. "Hey, Emily," Mia said, holding out a colorful bracelet. "I made this for you. It's friendship colors." Emily blinked in surprise before breaking into a wide grin. "Thank you," she exclaimed, slipping the bracelet onto her wrist. Moments like these reminded Mark and Sarah why they had chosen to stay strong despite the challenges. Their actions weren't just protecting Emily, they were inspiring others to do the same. Back at home, Mark took time to reflect on everything that had happened. Sitting on the porch one evening, he watched Emily play in the backyard, laughing. As she chased butterflies with Mr. Whiskers tucked under her arm, Sarah joined him, handing him a cup of tea. "You've changed the world, you know," she said softly, sitting beside him. Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm just a dad, doing his job," he replied. "If anything, it's Emily who's changing the world. Look at her, she's fearless." Sarah smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "She gets that from you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, casting a golden glow over the yard. "Do you think Richard really means it?" Sarah asked after a pause, referring to the apology letter. Mark thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe," he said. "People can change, if they want to. Either way, it's not our responsibility to fix him. Our job is to focus on Emily and making sure she knows she's loved." Sarah nodded, squeezing his hand. Well, mission accomplished there. As they watched Emily twirl in circles, her laughter echoing through the evening air, it was clear that love and kindness had already won. The scars of that day at the park might linger, but they were healing. And in their place, a brighter, more compassionate future was taking shape. For Mark and Sarah, justice wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about creating a world where Emily and everyone like her could thrive without fear. And in that moment, surrounded by beauty and warmth, they knew they were on the right path. Weeks passed and life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy for Emily and her family. The initial frenzy of media attention began to fade, though reminders of the incident lingered in unexpected ways. Strangers still recognized Mark at the grocery store or stopped Sarah in the park to express their admiration. Emily, now accustomed to the extra attention, greeted everyone with her signature bright smile. She didn't fully grasp why people were so interested in her story, but she appreciated the warmth it brought into her life. At school, things had improved dramatically. Emily's classmates continued to include her in activities, and teachers went out of their way to ensure she felt valued. During art class, one girl named Lily asked Emily to collaborate on a painting inspired by kindness. Together, they created a vibrant mural of a tree with branches extending across the canvas, each leaf bearing a word like love, courage, and acceptance. When the teacher hung the painting in the hallway, it became a symbol of unity for the entire school. Mark and Sarah couldn't have been prouder of their daughter. They saw how much she had grown, not just in confidence, but in resilience. What started as a painful experience had transformed into something beautiful, teaching Emily lessons about strength, compassion, and standing up for what's right. 1. Evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Mark decided it was time to share Richard's apology letter with Emily. He had debated whether or not to tell her, but ultimately, he believed it was important for her to understand forgiveness, and that even those who make mistakes can try to change. He began gently, sliding the letter across the table toward her. This came in the mail a while ago. It's from the man we met at the park. Emily frowned, her fork pausing midair. The mean man? She asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Yes, Mark replied. He wrote this to say he's sorry for what happened. Do you want to read it? Emily hesitated, glancing at her mom for reassurance. Sarah nodded encouragingly. It's okay, sweetheart, she said. You don't have to if you don't feel ready. After a moment of thought, Emily reached for the letter and began reading it aloud, stumbling slightly over some of the longer words. When she finished, she looked up at her parents, her brow furrowed in confusion. Does this mean he's nice? Now? Mark smiled softly. It means he's trying, he explained. People aren't perfect, Em. Sometimes they say or do things they regret later. What matters is whether they're willing to learn from their mistakes. Emily chewed on, her lip, considering his words. So, should I forgive him? That's your choice, Sarah interjected gently. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened or letting someone hurt you again. It means choosing to let go of anger because it's better for you. Does that make sense? Emily nodded slowly. I think so, she said. I guess I can forgive him, but I won't forget how his words made me feel. Her parents exchanged proud smiles. At such a young age, Emily was already demonstrating wisdom beyond her years. The following weekend, the Thompsons attended a community event organized in honor of Emily's bravery. Local leaders had come together to host a Day of Kindness, festival complete with games, performances, and booths promoting inclusivity and acceptance. Families from all walks of life filled the park, united by a shared desire to celebrate diversity and spread positivity. When Emily arrived, holding her dad's hand tightly, she was greeted with thunderous applause. People lined up to meet her, offering hugs, gifts, and heartfelt thanks. One elderly woman handed her a bouquet of flowers, tears streaming down her face. Thank you for being brave, she whispered. You've given us hope. Though overwhelmed, Emily handled the attention with grace. She posed for photos, signed autographs with her mom's help, and even gave a short speech, something Mark and Sarah never imagined she'd be comfortable doing. Standing on a small stage, clutching Mr. Whiskers for support, she spoke directly to the crowd. I'm Emily, she began shyly, her voice trembling slightly, and I want everyone to know that it's okay to be different. We're all special in our own way. And when we stand up for each other, we can make the world a better place. The audience erupted into cheers, many wiping away tears. For a brief moment, Emily felt like a superhero, a feeling she would cherish forever. As the day drew to a close, Mark took Emily aside for a quiet moment under a tree. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass. He knelt down to her level, placing his hands on her shoulders. You know, Em, he said, his voice filled with pride. What happened at the park wasn't easy, but look at everything that came out of it. You've inspired so many people, including me. Emily tilted her head, surprised. You're my hero, Daddy, she said earnestly. How could I inspire you? Mark chuckled, pulling her into a tight hug. Because you remind me every day that love is stronger than hate, that kindness always wins, and that no matter what challenges we face, we can overcome them together. Emily hugged him back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. I love you, Daddy, she whispered. I love you too, champ, Mark replied, more than anything. Back home that night, Emily sat curled up on the couch with Mr. Whiskers, replaying the events of the past few weeks in her mind. Despite the ugliness she had faced, she couldn't help but feel grateful. Her family had stood by her, strangers had rallied around her, and even the man who had hurt her had tried to apologize. Sarah joined her on the couch, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. What are you thinking about, sweetheart? She asked. Emily smiled, leaning into her mom's embrace. I'm thinking about how lucky I am, she said simply. Even when bad things happen, good things can come out of them. Like today. Everyone was so kind. Sarah kissed the top of her head. That's because you taught them how to be, she said. You showed the world that being different isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to celebrate. Emily yawned, her eyelids growing heavy. As she drifted off to sleep, she dreamed of trees with colorful leaves, butterflies dancing in the air, and crowds of smiling faces cheering her on. In the months that followed, the ripple effects of Emily's story continued to spread. Schools incorporated her journey into anti-bullying campaigns, emphasizing the importance of empathy and inclusion. Communities held regular kindness days, encouraging acts of generosity and understanding. Even Richard, the man whose hateful words had sparked the chain of events, found a new purpose. Inspired by the backlash he received, he volunteered at a local organization supporting individuals with disabilities, determined to educate himself and others. For Emily, however, the greatest lesson was simple. Love conquers fear. Hate may exist in the world, but it cannot thrive in the presence of courage, compassion, and unity. And as she grew older, she carried this truth with her, becoming a beacon of hope for anyone who dared to believe in a brighter future. The little girl who once struggled to take steps in the park had walked a long way, both literally and figuratively. With her family by her side and the world rooting for her, Emily proved that even the smallest voices can spark the biggest changes.